For the first time ever, the mega sporting event is being hosted by an Arab country. Qatar is the chosen one.
It seems that Qatar is host not just to the World Cup games but also to business, political and even geopolitical developments on the sidelines, with ministers, royalty, other prominent figures apparently making deals in the desert.
In an age where massive empires no longer exist, is it possible for Qatar to use Adolf Hitler's strategies to rise up in power? By utilizing an array of diplomatic, economic, and political strategies, Qatar has managed to build up its reputation as a formidable force on the global stage. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the business of sports and how Qatar used FIFA to get what it wanted. And most importantly, what role does hosting a FIFA World Cup play in this regard? By understanding Qatar's tactics, we can gain valuable insight into the modern geopolitical landscape and its implications for the future. So without wasting any further time, let's quickly get started. When FIFA voted to give Qatar the opportunity to host the 2022 World Cup in December 2010, the decision shocked the entire world. Many spectators expressed surprise and more than a little disbelief that sporting powerhouses like the United States, Japan, and Australia could be vanquished by a desert monarchy whose soccer team had never advanced to the World Cup. The World Cup is a complicated international athletic event that attracts large numbers of spectators and demands the infrastructure to support them. Qatar is the smallest country to have ever hosted the World Cup. Qatar is nearly 20% smaller than Connecticut, at only 4,471 square miles. The majority of the nation's 2.8 million inhabitants reside in the region near the capital Doha, which is surrounded by a desolate sandy plain. When it was chosen to host the tournament in 2010, Qatar lacked several of the stadiums, hotels, and roads necessary. The nation relied on its sizable population of migrant laborers who comprised 90% or more of its labor force to construct them. Only roughly 300,000 people who live in Qatar are nationals of that country. Migrant workers whose visas are linked to their employment, a system that is widespread in the Middle East, far outnumber them. Even though the World Cup Organizing Committee has not officially verified it, Qatar is said to have spent almost $229 billion on World Cup infrastructure. Numerous analysts and media sites reported that the overall capex for all infrastructural development ranged from $220 billion to $300 billion. This includes a brand new airport, a new city, a new port, new gas and oil facilities, a Doha metro, and several thousand kilometers of roads and highways. Even though it's impossible to determine the actual cost of the FIFA World Cup for Qatar, it is undoubtedly the most expensive World Cup organized since the first one in 1930. Numerous studies claim that the entire investment cost may possibly exceed the sum of the previous 21. To provide you with an idea, the 2014 World Cup in Brazil and the 2018 World Cup in Russia, both of which cost just under $15 billion, were previously the most costly World Cups. So, does Qatar make money off the World Cup? We must take into account the related cash flows from such a significant investment of roughly $229 billion in order to provide an answer to that question. To see the games live, over 1 million tourists have traveled to Qatar. However, a subsidiary firm that is wholly owned by FIFA owns the financial flow from ticket sales. They do not actually go into the Qatari state budget. Moreover, the sporting extravaganza in Qatar is being watched by more than 5 billion people. However, FIFA also owns the marketing rights, which generated over $1 billion in revenue in the 2018 cycle. For a total of $4.6 billion, the TV rights to the 2018 Russia World Cup were sold to international media outlets. FIFA keeps all of these cash inflows. So the question comes to, why exactly is Qatar investing in the FIFA World Cup so much when it's not benefiting much? Is it some kind of geopolitical strategy or just a wrong decision? To understand that, let's first quickly learn about the problems faced by Qatar in the present time. The country of Qatar faces several fundamental issues, including a heavy reliance on volatile hydrocarbons and a need to increase its competitiveness in non-oil sectors. The oil and gas sector has continuously provided at least 80% of the government of Qatar's overall earnings since 2014 and 90% of Qatar's total exports. Despite efforts to promote non-hydrocarbon sectors and diversify the economy away from hydrocarbons to knowledge-based sectors. According to reports, the demand for oil will slow down by 71%, and the cost of renewable energy has also started dropping below the fossil fuel costs, so by 2050, Qatar will have to shift its dependency from oil and hydrocarbons. Moreover, as Qatar is a small country with a small military force surrounded by huge nations, its location is a big problem itself. For now, as the US is trading oil with Qatar, it is also providing it with security guarantees. But when this trade will end, Qatar will only be left with insecure borders. Even though Qatar's military force has potentially grown in the past few years, it has to go a long way to face giant nations like Saudi Arabia and the US. In addition, it's also taken military help from Pakistan to provide security to tourists in the time of the World Cup. On top of that, the image of Qatar, unlike other Gulf countries, is also not reputed well globally. So this brings us to the part of why exactly is Qatar hosting the FIFA World Cup 2022? According to some, the nation intended to change its reputation as a natural gas producer with a questionable human rights record by leveraging the grandeur of the World Cup. They saw the decision, which would cost the nation over $200 billion, as an example of sports washing, the practice of exploiting sports to portray a nation or business in a favorable light. The word sports washing refers to the practice of people, organizations, businesses, or governments utilizing sports to restore reputations damaged by misconduct. Sports washing, a type of propaganda, can be carried out by holding sporting events, buying or supporting sporting teams, or taking part in a sport. Before we move on, if you're not subscribed to BizStudied, you need to subscribe before the end of the year. We're trying to get to 50,000 subscribers, so please subscribe so we hit our goal and reach many more people. We promise the next video will also be much better, so please subscribe and thank you so much. Now back to the video. Sports washing is thought to have been utilized internationally to deflect attention from countries with a history of violating human rights and corruption issues. It's thought that sports washing has been employed to hide vices, crimes, and scandals at both the individual and corporate levels. One instance of reputation cleansing is sports washing. Now, if you look into history, that's exactly what Hitler did in his time. The host government's job is to persuade the sporting community that the tournament will be a success and won't be marred by political issues. Nazi Germany excelled at this. The entry of Hitler's administration in 1933 proved to be difficult because the International Olympic Committee had awarded Berlin the 1936 Summer Games in 1931. Many Nazi opponents protested the Olympics turning into a Nazi propaganda event, especially Jewish and trade union organizations in France, Britain, the US, and other countries. In response, the German government invited important parties, including American athletic administrator Avery Brundage, on fact-finding missions. Brundage's trip in 1934 was intended to investigate signs of anti-Jewish prejudice in sports, but his Nazi hosts closely monitored every action to secure their desired result. Brundage received first-class governmental treatment but was forbidden from privately meeting any Jewish athletes. There was never any question regarding the trip's superficiality, since every communication was conducted through official interpreters. Alan Gutman, a historian, remarked that Brundage believed what he was predisposed to believe, and that he went back to the US persuaded that the Nazis were in control of the Olympics and that they were safe. Brundage's views were clearly refuted by the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, which made structural prejudice against Jews a key component of all spheres of German public and private life. The Nazi government attempted to hide its brutal racial policies in August 1936 when it was hosting the Summer Olympics. In accordance with instructions from the propaganda ministry led by Joseph Goebbels, the majority of anti-Jewish signs were temporarily taken down and newspapers softened their harsh language. Adolf Hitler used the venue to disseminate Nazi propaganda, although he made a point of removing Jewish banned posters from public spaces, masking overt anti-Semitism while continuing to promote his ideology of the Aryan race through signs, publications, and other means. Despite threats of protests from certain countries, German competitors won the most medals, and the media lauded the games for bringing Germany back in the fold and making them more human again. Best sports washing ever. Thus, the dictatorship took advantage of the Olympics to give foreign viewers and journalists a false impression of a tolerant, peaceful Germany, which eventually made Hitler gain more strength all across the world. More examples followed in Mexico City in 1968, Moscow in 1980, Beijing in 2008 for the Summer Games, Sochi in 2014, and Beijing once more in 2022 for the Winter Games. Regarding the FIFA World Cup, the tournaments held by fascist Italy in 1934 and Argentina's military regime in 1978 serve as classic instances. Similar is the case with Qatar. This winter's World Cup fits neatly into these narratives as an example of sports washing. The event is intended to highlight a Qatari regime that is moving on the right path and deserving of the support of the international community, playing into Orientalist conceptions of tradition versus modernization. This has a more particular goal in mind than merely enhancing Qatar's standing abroad. It is hardly surprising that Qatar may get multiple advantages from hosting an event of this magnitude that goes well beyond the sports industry. The rise in visitors in 2022 would not only enhance Qatar's economy in the immediate term, but also in the long run as a result of the country's growing global profile as a tourism destination. The Qatar National Vision 2030, a government initiative to make Qatar a worldwide society and provide a superior level of living, is achieved through World Cup hosting. Projects directly related to the World Cup are included in the National Development Plans linked to the QNV 2030, which aims to encourage post-tournament sustainability. Foreign investment is probably going to expand as Qatar's worldwide profile rises. Numerous international enterprises are drawn to the countries that host large events due to the rapid economic expansion. Qatar will profit from foreign investment by enabling increased development and economic growth. Besides that, the sovereign wealth fund of Qatar is known as the Qatar Investment Authority. The state of Qatar established the QIA in 2005 to bolster the economic growth of the country by diversifying into different forms of investment. The QIA's assets were predicted to be worth $450 billion in 2021. Qatar has been actively investing in real estate abroad as a way to increase its economic potency. In recent years, the country has made significant investments in international property markets, including those in the United States and other countries across Europe and Asia. Given the significant economic and political influence that nations like the United States and developing economies in Asia have on the world, Qatar has historically made significant investments in the West and Asia. Moreover, Qatar, one of the top 20 nations in terms of individuals owning property in the UK, is a major investor in international real estate. More than £40 billion worth of Qatari investments have been made in the UK, with property investment being the most popular type of investment. Qatar has established ties with a variety of nations, from developed Western nations to developing and growing economies in Asia, by deliberately employing its opulent resources and investing in them. This move is an attempt to diversify Qatar's economy beyond oil and gas exports and give it a greater financial foundation. By investing in the real estate markets of other countries, Qatar can potentially gain a greater foothold and more economic power in those regions. This strategy has paid off for Qatar so far, with its investments generating substantial returns. This brings us to the end of the video. So now you know why Qatar has invested a lot of its money in hosting a FIFA World Cup, and what are its geopolitical strategies and how it's trying so hard to improve its global image. What do you think? Is Qatar really using Hitler's strategy to rise in power or not? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos, and thank you for watching.